This video is sponsored by World Anvil. Today we're going to share how we made this batch of 3D printed tiles into a Zelda inspired board that you can use for tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, and really any kind of game you'd probably play with your kids, nieces, nephews, and or neighbors. Okay, who am I kidding? If you're a nostalgic nerd like me, you'll probably play with this too. In this video, we're going to walk you through this build and share all the details, including the good, the bad, the ugly that we ran into along the way, as well as the cost, print times, and more. So stay with us, all of that coming up next. Hi there, my name is Danny, the 3D Printing DM, and welcome to 3D Printed Tabletop, a channel where we cover all things 3D printing for your tabletop game. As many of you know, big 3D printing projects like this one are a lot more than just hitting print, even if you aren't designing them, and that is one of the reasons I made this video, to share all the details like print times, filament use, cost, the ups and downs that come along with the journey. Now, before we dive into making this board, here's where these files and the ideas for this project came from. This has been brewing in my head ever since I backed a Kickstarter called Azar Games about a year ago now, and these 3D printable tiles and terrain were clearly designed as an homage to old video games like the Game Boy and SNES era Zelda games, and I love those games. Look, here's a real photo of my now 5-year-old baby boy. I live for this shit. And this was the perfect excuse to make something big and really fun. So as you're watching this, if you decide you want to try this project yourself, you can get the base files here on My Mini Factory, look up the designer Florian Azar, and you'll find it all there. And just to be transparent, there was no money or sponsorship involved. This was just a project I wanted to do and share with you here. So here were the main objectives for this project. First, I wanted to make a few different areas like you see in many Zelda games. The starter set files included more like a beach area, but I wasn't going to be able to make them all. But I definitely wanted a few of the familiar tropes. So we ended up with forest, swamp, mountains, a town, and some ruins. Second, I wanted these sets to make sense and have different pockets for different encounters. I'm a DM after all, so of course I'm thinking about the different things the players might encounter in each tile and the kinds of paths they might take from area to area. So that's why there are little elevations, little bushes in certain nooks and crannies, and at least one location of interest in each area. And third, I was going to try and pull out all the 3D printing stops for this, at least by my standards. I'd try different filaments, different color variants, do more than just the plain boring gray I always do. And I know a lot of folks always print like this, but I'm not one of them. If it isn't in gray, it's because I print for you, the viewer, so you don't end up. So step 1, the 3D printing. I decided to use this project as a test for both the Elegoo Neptune 2S and the Ender 3 S1, and I enjoyed using both printers. But using two different printers I was actively testing was probably a mistake, because here's some advice I can share when doing a project like this. Have your first layer and tolerance calibrations dialed in for fit-dependent projects like this one, and calibrate it from the very start before beginning, especially if you're using two different printers. Don't assume the pieces are gonna connect correctly. I noticed this was an issue when I saw the connecting pegs and holes were either too loose or too tight. And for a locking set, you can imagine why this would be an issue. So this was really a dimensional accuracy problem, and I knew it was either my settings, the bed level not being perfect, or maybe just a difference in the bed texture. Or all of the above, because it definitely wasn't related to the models themselves. And I could not pinpoint the exact problem. So I ran all these tests with different printers, which combo worked best, different settings, etc. And I ended up only using one of the two printers at the end of it all, the Neptune 2S. Don't get me wrong, the Ender 3 S1 print quality was good. There was some issue with those tolerances though, which impacted the project. And this slowed down the project in half at that point, because I ended up having to reprint a lot of it. Beautiful, great start. But I pressed on and ended up with each of the areas I'd wanted. So before we talk about post-processing though, let me tell you about today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is a set of world building tools that allows you to create, organize, and store your world setting. You can do everything from write detailed articles, upload stunning original maps, and link all of your creations and articles directly to that map. You can also create timelines to help keep track of all of the events you create for your world. Use parallel timelines to track events in a specific country or for a character, like when the party decides to go to the Dark World version of the world. World Anvil is made with the world builder in mind and even allows you to search your whole world by typing 3 letters in any search bar. World Anvil even includes complete novel writing software custom designed to help you plot, write, and edit your book and novels, as well as publish them chapter by chapter, even adding music, audiobooks, images, and more. So go check out World Anvil and start fleshing out your world, maybe your 3D printed world today, and don't forget to use promo code 3DPRINT to receive 40% off your annual subscription. Thanks for supporting content creators World Anvil. Now let's get back to the board. After printing these, I needed to make sure they were up to my personal quality standard. After looking over the prints, fortunately, I didn't have any stringing to deal with, and most of the files turned out pretty alright. There was some noise in some of them, and there was some minor cleanup due to overhangs, but that's okay because we weren't going for perfection since these are going to be looked at from the seat at a table and this isn't for a painting contest. Now, I did end up doing some sanding and clipping to get some of these to connect properly because I didn't want to reprint all of the bad pieces, and did cheat with some of the more loose ones, just glued them on there. Overall though, the easiest solution was just to reprint them more accurately, and that's what I did. I did do some painting tests to see how they might look painted, and I decided it would be too much work to get each of these boards to look cohesive and like the games I was going for. So I left them unpainted and accepted that each color and the designs did the job just fine for role-playing games like it's intended to be used for in my case. To me, they still looked really cool and conveyed their idea honestly. There is one thing I wanted to paint up though, el huevito, aka the famous big egg. Now that we've had a good look at these, let's get into the juicier project details like print time, filament use, and cost. Let's talk filament use first. This project took me 3/4 of a roll of bright green filament, 3/4 of a roll of dark green filament, 3/4 of a roll of light brown filament, 1/4 of a roll of dark brown filament, 1/4 a roll of dark teal filament, 1/2 a roll of lighter gray filament, and a negligible amount of blue, red, and gray filaments. So why don't I use exact numbers? Well, for a project like this, they're usually failed pieces and sometimes leftover pieces unless you plan things exactly, and I think that's hard for a modular project like this one. So instead of measuring exact amounts, measuring how much filament it costs in estimates is actually more accurate in my experience. And now that we know filament usage, we can talk cost. All of these filaments I bought cost somewhere between $21 to $23, depending on when I bought them. Just to be safe though, I'm rounding up the cost of a roll of filament to $25 per 1 kilogram roll. Adding and rounding up, we probably could have printed this project in 4 different colors, 2 greens, 1 brown, and 1 gray. Our filament usage brings us to 4 rolls of filament, so $100. And that would have been right on the money for filament usage. Adding in 2 additional colors, this brings cost up to $150, and adding in the negligible blue and red and gray, that brings it up even higher to about $200. Yikes. Before going into print times, I want to give a disclaimer. I think these would look just fine printed in a few different monocolors like these. Even printing in 1 color would still look cool. The way I chose to print these tiles drastically affected the cost, and I wouldn't recommend for everyone, which is why I brought up the 4 color option. And if you're a great painter, you can take this project to the next level. But even without doing any painting, using a different color for some of the pieces worked really well in my opinion, and that was one of the goals of this project, to try something new without using multi-material printers or accessories. In other words, to make an accessible project that others could do without needing to be a good painter. So print times. Printing the baseboards of each took about 15 to 20 hours. Printing the batches of tiles took about 55 to 60 hours. I printed them all in big batches except for small additions I decided I wanted or didn't get to include in the big groups. And it wasn't uncommon for there to be 1 or 2 tiles that got messed up or messed up the print, but these were the average times overall. Now the bottom bases for each section took about 20 hours and the top tiles took about 60 hours or so, some more or less. In reality, it took me about 70 to 80 hours per section, which in my real world time meant this project took me between 3 to 4 weeks, which was spread out over several months. But if you were to focus on one single project using 1 printer, this is about how long it would probably take, not including the double prints I had to do at the beginning of the project. Now some of you might be saying, but there are 168 hours in a week. Why did it take so long? And that is because, at least for me, It's very hard to optimize print jobs with my schedule so that prints are going every hour, print jobs are perfect every time, and you know exactly what you need for projects like this one that are modular. I was figuring out as I went along because I'm totally not a planner, but if you can optimize, you can probably do this in 2 weeks or so using one printer. I'm really happy with how this Zelda theme board turned out. I'm planning on painting some of these FartQuest minis to play with on this board with my daughter, but I hope that this project has helped you maybe get inspired to start your own build that will help you connect more with your games and friends and family and hobbies. I want to give a big thanks to all of my patrons over on Patreon. It's because of them that I'm able to make videos like this. And if you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron over on Patreon, and I'll see you next time. As always, happy printing and happy gaming.